Did you know the man who masterminded D-Day later became President of the United States? At 53, he carried the fate of millions on his shoulders. Dwight D. Eisenhower wasn't just the supreme commander of the Normandy invasion. He was the strategist whose deception kept Hitler guessing. Phantom armies, fake radio traffic, and double agents sold the Nazis a lie. The real blow would fall at Pas-de-Calais. While Hitler waited, Eisenhower struck Normandy on June 6, 1944, cracking Fortress Europe. In this video, we follow Ike's journey from battlefield planner to head of state, and the risky choices that changed history. Section 1. The politician general arrives in a war of professionals, June 5, 1944. Southwick House near Portsmouth, England. Rain needles against the blackout windows. The great map room smells of wet wool, cigarette smoke, and chalk dust. Boots scrape across tiled floors as officers move in and out with folders clutched to their chests. Outside, engines idle in the dark, landing craft, trucks, entire armies held in a clenched fist, waiting for release. Inside the room, a tall man with a broad face and tired eyes stands in front of a wall-sized map of Normandy. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, is not wearing a pistol. He rarely does. The war film version of a general would have a sidearm, a swagger, maybe a campaign ribbon gleaming under the lamplight. Eisenhower looks instead like what he is, a man who has not slept properly in weeks. In one corner, meteorologist Group Captain James Stagg lays out another forecast. Wind, low cloud, rough surf. The channel is angry. Stagg speaks carefully, like a man walking across thin ice in front of a firing squad. Eisenhower listens without interrupting. His jaw tightens when Stagg says there might be a window. Not certainty, but a sliver of possibility. In the early hours of June 6th, around him, the room is packed with men who have made war their entire lives. British commanders with ribbons from the Somme. American generals who came up through the trenches of 1918 and the dust of North Africa. Navy admirals who can look at the sea and see geometry. All of them are waiting for Eisenhower to decide the fate of 150,000 men before sunrise. It is here, in the quiet between forecasts and fate, that Eisenhower embodies why some German commanders dismiss him. He is not a battlefield legend in their minds. No dazzling early victories, no reputation forged in mud and blood, like Rommel in 1940 or Manstein at Kharkov. Eisenhower is a coordinator, a mediator, a man whose greatest talent seems to be keeping quarrelsome allies from strangling each other. To the German High Command, the Allied coalition is a weakness, a committee war, a war managed by politicians. They look at Eisenhower and see someone made for conferences, not combat. And truthfully, if you rewound Eisenhower's life to its beginnings, you might think the same. He is a West Point man, yes. Class of 1915, the class the stars fell on. But unlike other future titans, Eisenhower never fought in the First World War. While others went to France, he trained tank crews in Pennsylvania. He watched war from the dock, not the deck. In the interwar years, he served under generals who were more famous than he was. Fox Connor, George Marshall, Douglas MacArthur. He learned strategy and politics and how to manage strong personalities without flinching. When America enters the war, Eisenhower rises like a rocket through the staff system. Marshall sees in him something rare. Calm under pressure, clarity under confusion, the ability to make decisions without theatrics. Eisenhower becomes the man who can translate 1,000 chaotic voices into one workable plan. That's how he ends up in London in early 1944, inheriting the greatest invasion enterprise in history. But in the months before D-Day, Eisenhower has been living with an invisible war inside his own headquarters. Montgomery wants command of the ground battle and leans on British seniority. Patton wants action yesterday and sees caution as a kind of moral failure. Air commanders argue over which targets matter most. Naval planners speak in tides and timings that could drown the entire operation if off by an hour. Each branch, each nation, each legion inside the Allied tent carries its own ego like a weapon. Eisenhower's genius is not that he dominates them. It's that he survives them. He sits in rooms that could melt steel. He smiles, listens, and then cuts through the noise with a decision that makes everyone feel heard, even when they didn't get what they wanted. It's a soldier's kind of diplomacy. The diplomacy of getting men to kill and die in the same direction. In the German mind, this looks like softness. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, commander-in-chief in the West, is an old Prussian warhorse. He sees the Allies as rich amateurs. In his view, they lack the steel discipline of the German operational tradition. Even Rommel, the desert fox, now charged with strengthening the Atlantic Wall, senses the Allied leadership is divided. He doesn't hate Eisenhower. He simply doesn't fear him the way he fears Patton or Montgomery. German officers interpret Allied debates as weakness, not as the friction of a free coalition trying to build something too massive for any one man to control. They lean on the Atlantic Wall like a fortress of faith, and the wall is real. Concrete bunkers stitched along the coast, anti-tank ditches, mines that can tear a landing craft to ribbons, steel hedgehogs sunk into sand, artillery casemates with interlocking fields of fire. Rommel has flooded lowlands and planted stakes in likely drop zones. Rommel's asparagus, men call them, intended to impale airborne gliders. To the German soldier staring out to sea in the spring of 1944, the coastline feels unbreakable, a hard edge of Europe. To Eisenhower, it is a door that must be kicked in, not by one nation, not by one army, but by an entire alliance moving as a single organism. On June 5th, while German coastal units calculate sectors and tide lines, Eisenhower walks out into the night air at Southwick House. The rain has softened. The Channel wind still carries cold salt into the dark. In a separate room, he writes, by hand, a short statement. It is a message he hopes will never be read. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, he writes, it is mine alone. Then he folds the paper, puts it in his pocket, and goes back into the map room where the world waits. He looks at Stagg. He looks at his commanders. He thinks of the men already on ships, seasick in the blackness, clutching rifles and photos of wives. Eisenhower has been mocked as a politician general by men who don't understand the kind of courage that isn't loud. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't wave a hand for drama. He just says the sentence that releases an empire of steel toward the coast of France. Okay, we'll go. And the Atlantic Wall, for all its concrete certainty, has no idea what is coming. Section 2. The Long Night Across the Channel. June 5th, 6th, 1944. The English Channel. The ships begin to move in darkness, as if the sea itself is sliding toward France. From the deck of an American transport, a private of the 1st Infantry Division leans over the rail and vomits into the black water. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, tasting diesel fumes and fear. Around him, men sit shoulder to shoulder, helmets low, rifles cradled between knees. Some whisper. Some stare into nothing. Some write letters they know won't be mailed until after the outcome is decided. Above them, the sky is a pulsing cathedral of engines. C-47 Dakotas roar east in long lines, towing gliders that creak and sway in the turbulence. Paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions sit on webbed benches with faces painted in charcoal, checking gear for the 10th time. They slap each other on the shoulder in the narrow fuselage, half grin, half prayer. If you could pull the camera up high enough, you would see it all. 5 seaborne assault divisions, 3 airborne divisions, almost 7,000 vessels. From battleships to tugs, moving on a single timetable. A tide of humans and machines crossing the channel like an eclipse. But the man who set this into motion is not at sea and not in a cockpit. He is back on shore, pacing a quiet corridor at Southwick House. Eisenhower is not watching a battle unfold. He is waiting for one to begin, which is a different kind of torment. He checks reports, rechecks them, rereads the same paragraphs until the letters blur. Every plan is now out of his hands, carried away by the waves, by the wind, by the countless small things that can kill an invasion before a single bullet is fired. The German commanders on the other side, the professionals, cannot imagine that their opponent would gamble on this weather. Across the channel, in Normandy, the night is restless but not alarmed. In coastal bunkers near Omaha and Utah, German sentries shift in wool greatcoats. The Atlantic Wall garrisons are a patchwork. Older veterans, young conscripts, men from occupied countries absorbed into the Wehrmacht, some hardened, some barely trained. Their officers check rifles, lamps, and the horizon. To many of them, the invasion feels like a storm that might come someday, not tonight. Rommel is not there. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel has driven back to Germany to see his wife on her birthday and to plead for more armor. He believes the invasion will come, yes, but not through this sea and this weather. He is confident enough in the wall and in the Allied hesitancy that he feels safe leaving his post for 48 hours. Rundstedt, the senior commander, is in his headquarters at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, near Paris. He is exhausted. Years of war and politics have left him cynical, and he sees the coastal defenses as a rigid chessboard. His instinct is still the old German doctrine: keep panzer reserves inland, strike the landing once the enemy commits. To Rundstedt, the Atlantic Wall is meant to delay, not to win. The real fight is the counterattack. That counterattack, however, is bound by a chain. To move the panzer divisions, senior commanders need approval from Adolf Hitler personally. It's a deadly leash. The Germans have their armor, the 21st Panzer Division near Caen, the elite 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, Panzer Lehr, others held in reserve, but their authority to use it is tangled in politics and fear. Eisenhower, even if German officers don't grasp it yet, has already attacked that weakness. Months earlier, he insisted fortitude be treated as a frontline weapon. He protected it, funded it, and kept its deception consistent. Patton's Phantom Army in southeast England is more than cardboard tanks. Double agents, fake radio nets, controlled leaks, a whole shadow theater designed to keep German eyes fixed on Pas-de-Calais. Even tonight, as the real invasion armada grinds toward Normandy, German intelligence reports still whisper that the main blow is coming elsewhere. So the Atlantic Wall is manned, but the mind behind it is distracted. As midnight passes, Allied aircraft begin to arrive over France in waves. Some drop flares, others hit bridges, rail lines, and coastal batteries. The bombing is imperfect. Clouds scatter formations, smoke hides targets, but the effect is still brutal. Explosions walk along the coast like stepping giants. In villages inland, French civilians wake to trembling windows and low thunder. They lie still in bed, counting seconds between blasts, trying to guess which direction liberation is coming from. At 12:30 a.m., the first paratroopers jump. They slam into the night with a sound like tearing cloth. Some land exactly where they should, in hedgerows and fields meant to block German reinforcement routes. Others scatter miles away, thrown by wind and flak. The darkness fills with shouted names, snapped radios, the hiss of silk, and the crack of rifles somewhere unseen. A sergeant from the 101st Airborne lands hard in a flooded meadow, water up to his chest. His parachute drags him like a drowned sail. He cuts free, heart hammering, and crawls toward the faint line of a road. In the distance, tracer fire arcs upward. It looks like red insects climbing into the sky. Everywhere, the invasion is breaking into pieces. Not because the plan is failing, but because war always does this at the edge of reality. By 3 a.m., Eisenhower receives early reports. Airborne troops down, contact made, confusion expected. His staff tries to sound calm as they read messages with too many gaps, too many unknowns. He nods, absorbing it without flinching. He knows that by sunrise, everything will be decided by young men on beaches and in fields he has never seen. At 4:15 a.m., the naval guns open up. From battleships offshore, the first salvos streak into Normandy. The sound is not a boom, but a rolling roar, like the continent itself is being torn. Shells arc overhead, silent while flying, then detonate into orange blossoms on the coast. German soldiers in bunkers feel it in their teeth. Concrete trembles. Ceiling dust drifts down in a gray snowfall. Some men instinctively press back into the walls as if the ocean has turned into a gun. And still, for a few precious minutes, many German commanders believe this is a feint. That belief will not survive dawn. Section 3. Dawn on 5 beaches, June 6, 1944. Normandy coast, France. The sky turns the color of bruised steel just before sunrise. On the German side of the wall, dawn is usually a quiet shift change, a cigarette lit, a sentry relieved, the sea watched out of habit more than fear. But this dawn comes with an ocean full of shapes. At first they look like low clouds on the horizon, then the horizon itself begins to move. Landing craft in thousands grind forward in staggered lines, bows rising and falling in the swell. Behind them, darker silhouettes. Cruisers, destroyers, battleships. The water is so crowded with metal that it feels less like a sea and more like a highway. From a bunker above the sands of Omaha Beach, a German lieutenant, 352nd Infantry Division, presses field glasses to his face. His mouth dries. He is trained to recognize ship classes by outline, and what he sees makes his pulse jump. Not a raid, not a probe. This is a continent arriving. He shouts orders down the bunker corridor. Runners sprint. Phones ring with a frantic, crackling urgency. The Atlantic Wall has been waiting for this for 4 years. At Utah Beach on the western flank, the first American wave from the 4th Infantry Division nears shore. The tide and smoke drift them south of their planned landing zone. For a moment, that seems like disaster. Then it becomes luck. The defenses here are thinner than expected. The German strongpoints fewer. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., walking with a cane, steps ashore under fire and looks around at the confusion of men and markers in the surf. "We'll start the war from right here," he says, calm as if choosing a picnic site. They push inland fast, through dunes and flooded fields, linking with airborne troops who have already been fighting all night. Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches to the east receive British and Canadian forces. The sea there is rough too, but the bombardment has done more to crack the defenses. Tanks fitted with deep wading gear roll off landing craft. Engineers run forward with Bangalore torpedoes to cut wire. The beaches are still deadly, still chaotic. But the Allies are moving. Only Omaha, between Utah and Gold, becomes a slaughterhouse. The German 352nd Division is better trained, better placed, and less damaged by bombardment than Allied planners hoped. Their machine guns are sighted perfectly to rake the beach at angles. Their mortars already have range. The sea is high, the shore narrow, the exits limited. When the first ramps drop, The surf turns into a tangle of bodies and gear. An American from the 1st Infantry Division charges forward, immediately sees men cut down in front of him, and hits the sand hard. He crawls, dragging his rifle through seawater. Around him, tanks drown in deep water before they can fire a shot. Radios sputter. Officers are killed before they can wave their men into formations. German MG-42s, firing at a terrifying rate, hammer the sand in long bursts. The bullets don't just kill. They pin the living to the ground. Smoke from naval shells drifts across the waterline. Men stumble through it like ghosts, with their packs half torn off. Medics crouch beside the wounded, trying to stop bleeding that won't stop. On the beach, time loses its shape. 15 minutes feel like hours. For the German command, Omaha looks like proof that the wall works. Early messages flash inland. Enemy pinned, heavy casualties, landing disrupted. Some staff officers allow themselves a thin, exhausted smile. If this is the main landing, they think, it might be breaking. Rundstedt's headquarters receives the first reports from the coast. The old field marshal immediately understands the scale. He reaches for the phone, demands panzer release, but Hitler is asleep, and no one in the German chain of command dares wake him with uncertain news. The anxiety of dictatorship freezes the professional army at the moment it most needs initiative. Meanwhile, Rommel, far from Normandy, is driving back toward France when the first alarms reach him. He realizes instantly what the sea full of ships means. He orders reinforcements by phone, furious that the reserves are still locked behind Hitler's authority. The wall is holding in places, yes, but a wall is only strong if the mind behind it reacts in time. Back offshore, Eisenhower receives a stream of reports. His headquarters is now a nerve center listening to the screams of 5 beaches through wires. Utah progressing. Gold making steady gains. Juneau taking heavy fire, but moving inland. Sword moving toward Caen, then Omaha. Omaha, casualties high, progress limited, beach congested, exit routes under fire. The words are clinical. The reality is hell. Eisenhower says nothing for a long moment. He simply stares at the map, hands on the edge of the table. A lesser man might grasp at a new plan or try to reroute the tide with orders. Eisenhower understands that at Omaha, his power is gone. The decision now belongs to captains, sergeants, privates, men who are alive one second and ash the next. On Omaha itself, something shifts just before noon. Small groups of Americans begin to crawl to the base of the bluffs. They find dead ground under the seawall, then folds in the terrain. Naval destroyers, seeing the crisis, risk coming dangerously close to shore to fire point-blank at German strong points. Their shells punch holes in bunkers that had felt invulnerable. A lieutenant gathers a dozen men in a hollow under fire. He doesn't know where his battalion is. He barely knows where he is. He points up the slope anyway. Men follow. Not in a grand charge, but in a series of desperate climbs, throwing grenades, cutting wire, taking one pillbox at a time. By early afternoon, American troops are on top of the bluffs. They are exhausted, shattered, but moving. From a German bunker, a corporal sees shapes cresting the ridge behind him. His throat closes. The Atlantic wall has not been broken by a single blow. It is being unstitched by hundreds of tiny acts of stubbornness. And with every hour the Allies survive on the sand, the mockery of Eisenhower as a politician general shrivels inside the German command. Because this invasion is not chaos. It is orchestration. 5 beaches, 3 airborne divisions, naval gunfire, air superiority, logistics in motion, all at once. Held together by a commander they underestimated. The sea keeps vomiting men onto the coast. The wall keeps cracking. And somewhere in the German command posts, the realization begins to rise like a fever. This is not a feint. This is not a raid. This is the war arriving. Section 4. The wall cracks and the professionals panic. June 6th, 7th, 1944. Normandy, from the beaches to the German headquarters. By late afternoon on June 6th, the coastline of Normandy is no longer a line. It is a wound. At Omaha, the surf still carries bodies in and out like driftwood. But above the beach, the fight has shifted into the draws, those narrow, steep valleys that lead inland. The Americans are climbing through smoke and smashed grass, pulling themselves over the seams of Hitler's fortress Europe. They come up in ones and twos, then squads, then a thin, ragged stream. A German officer from the 302nd Division stands on a ridge behind Vierville-sur-Mer, watching a world he thought he understood tilt sideways. He has fought Russians on the Eastern Front. He knows what real war looks like. Yet this, he realizes, is worse. Because the enemy is not just fearless. He is endless. Every time a German position knocks down a wave, another wave appears behind it. Not dissolved or delayed, but guided, supported, fed by ships that never stop arriving. The Atlantic Wall was built to swallow a landing in the surf. It was not built to survive an army that keeps coming after the surf. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, British and Canadian units are already pushing toward their D-Day objectives. Their tanks grind through villages with names few of their men can pronounce. Engineers clear mines. Infantry follow close behind armor, rifles slung, faces tight and tired. They are not moving fast by the standards of a peacetime march. But in the logic of a beachhead, they are sprinting. At Pegasus Bridge, airborne troops have held the crossing since midnight. Their faces are streaked in sweat and cordite. Some have fired every round they carried. Their radios are half dead, their nerves raw. But the bridge still stands in Allied hands. A narrow steel throat through which reinforcements can pour. The first 24 hours of Overlord are supposed to be about survival, not elegance. Eisenhower planned for chaos, for misdrops, for bottlenecked roads, for beach sectors that might evaporate under fire. What he demanded from the plan was not perfection. He demanded momentum, and momentum is exactly what the Allies are building. German messages crackle up the chain in bursts of alarm. Enemy ashore in force. Multiple landings confirmed. Airborne troops in depth. Coastal batteries suppressed. Requests for armor urgent. Rundstedt reads the reports and feels the old soldier's dread. The kind that has nothing to do with fear for oneself, and everything to do with recognizing an operational disaster before others do. He turns to his chief of staff. "We must throw them into the sea," he says. There is no theatrical pause, no ideological rant. Just the cold, professional understanding that if Normandy becomes a stable bridgehead, the war in the West is lost. So Rundstedt sends the request again. Release the Panzer reserves now, tonight, before the Allied lodgment thickens into a wall of its own. He is repeating himself to a system that no longer listens to soldiers. The response crawls back from Berlin hours later like a corpse dragged through mud. No full Panzer commitment without Hitler's explicit order. In Hitler's headquarters, the reports are split. Some officers, especially those still hypnotized by fortitude, insist this is only a diversion, and the main blow is coming at Pas-de-Calais. They point to Patton's Phantom Army as proof that the Allies wouldn't gamble everything on Normandy. It is a lie Eisenhower has planted so deeply it is now steering German reality. Hitler hesitates. He sleeps late. He distrusts his generals. When he finally wakes and hears Normandy, he does not hear the invasion. He hears a trick, so armor does not move as a fist. It moves as fragments. The 21st Panzer Division, stationed near Caen, is the only substantial armored force that attacks on D-Day. In the afternoon, it pushes toward the coast between Sword and Juno, briefly reaching the sea in a narrow wedge. For a moment, German officers feel the old confidence. the feeling of armor slicing through infantry like a blade. Then Allied naval guns and aircraft pounce. Typhoon fighter bombers dive on the columns, rockets screaming down. Destroyers offshore hammer the exposed panzers with rapid salvos. The German wedge shatters, and the tanks pull back under fire, leaving burnt metal and dead crewmen in the fields. It is a preview of what German counterattack will look like under Allied air supremacy. Brave, professional, and pulverized before it can bite. Rommel arrives back in France in the evening. His face is gray with rage and exhaustion. He drives toward his headquarters, listening to reports that sound like a house collapsing room by room. He knows the truth in his bones. The longer Germany waits, the harder this becomes. Rommel believes defense is a race against time. Stop the invasion on the beaches or lose the war. He had built the wall as a trap for that first day. But without immediate centralized armor, the trap is now snapping shut on empty air. He storms into the communications room, demanding panzer release. His staff tries to get orders pushed through Berlin. The phone lines become wrestlers in a political arena, Rommel and Rundstedt on one end, Hitler's fears on the other. And in that gap, Eisenhower's real strength shows itself. Because while German professionals argue upward for permission to fight, the Allied machine is already fighting downward, sideways, everywhere, automatically. On the beaches, supply dumps are forming like small cities. Bulldozers shove aside wrecks so trucks can roll in. Combat engineers cut lanes through minefields. Naval beachmasters wave traffic under fire with flags like orchestra conductors. The real miracle of D-Day is not just men surviving bullets. It is men surviving logistics. Eisenhower's staff had built this system for months. Detailed schedules, fallback plans, redundant units. He had insisted on unity of command, even when it meant bruising egos. He had forced a coalition into a single tempo. Now, on the evening of June 6th, that tempo is paying out in steel and survival. By nightfall, roughly 156,000 Allied troops are ashore. The beachheads are not yet connected, not yet secure, but they are alive. For the Germans, that is the nightmare. Because an invasion that survives its first day is no longer an invasion. It is a front. At 10 Haas p.m., Rundstedt speaks with one of his aides and lets the mask slip. The war is lost, he says quietly, not as propaganda, but as calculation. If they hold here. He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. Every professional in the room understands what holding means. It means airfields built in Normandy. It means ports seized. It means reinforcements arriving faster than Germany can destroy them. It means the Atlantic Wall has failed its purpose, and the man German commanders mocked as a politician general has done something they did not think an amateur coalition could do. He has put an army on the continent and kept it there. June 7th arrives with smoke still hanging over the coast. The Allies dig in and surge forward at once, turning villages into strong points, hedgerows into killing lanes. The Germans counterattack piecemeal, professionally, desperately. The wall is not just cracking now, it is behind them. Section 5. Eisenhower's real war begins, inland June the 7th, 13th, 1944. Normandy hedgerows and Allied high command. The morning light of June 7th doesn't feel like victory. It feels like work. Along the Normandy coast, the beaches are no longer beaches. They are supply arteries, littered with smashed landing craft, drowned tanks, and the hulks of men who never stood up again. Engineers haul bodies aside to clear lanes for trucks. The smell is salt, fuel, blood, and hot metal. A beachhead is an ugly thing before it is a heroic one. Inland, the terrain turns mean. Normandy's hedgerows, thick earthen banks crowned by tangled bushes and trees, are not just fences. They are natural fortresses that split the countryside into 1,000 little rooms. Every field becomes a bunker. every sunken lane a rifle trap. German defenders know this landscape like a second skin. They rig corners with machine guns, hide mortars behind hedges, and let the Allies walk into crossfires that bloom at 10 yards. American soldiers who had imagined a breakout after the beaches now find themselves fighting a war measured in feet. They crawl through wet grass, press their helmets into soil, and learn the awful geometry of hedgerow combat. You cannot see the enemy until you are nearly on top of him, and by then he has already seen you. Near St. Lo, a platoon from the 29th Infantry Division takes a field at noon and loses it by dusk, then takes it again at midnight, then loses it again the next morning. The war here is not about maneuver. It is about endurance, about who can keep standing after the 20th exchange of grenades in the same orchard. The Germans are shocked, not because the Allies are struggling, but because they do not break. This is the part German commanders underestimated most about Eisenhower's army. They had built a story in their minds. Rich Americans, soft British, coalition politics. The first day on the coast was supposed to be the test. Break them there and they go home. But Eisenhower's system isn't designed around a single heroic gamble. It is designed around persistence. Every night after D-Day, more Allied troops arrive. More artillery, more ammunition, more medical supplies. The beaches keep spitting out men and machines like a geared heartbeat. Even when a unit is chopped up in a hedgerow, there is another unit behind it and another after that. This is not romantic war. This is industrial war, and Eisenhower understands industrial war better than any general alive, because he grew up inside its logic. Back in his headquarters, his map is now changing hourly. The outlines of the beachheads thicken, spread, bump against German lines like wet plaster pressed into cracks. He visits the front on June 12th, moving through a world of shattered villages and exhausted men. He wears the same plain uniform. He does not arrive with a parade of photographers. When he stops to talk to troops, he listens more than he speaks. He asks what they need. He asks where they're stuck. He looks them in the eye and lets his calm do what speeches can't. The strength of Eisenhower is not that he pretends this is easy. It's that he refuses to let difficulty change the direction of the war. Inside Allied High Command, the coalition remains a living fire. Montgomery insists the British-Canadian push toward Caen is the decisive axis. Bradley focuses on the American grind toward St. Lo and Cherbourg. Patton, still held back because of the deception plan, prowls like a caged predator, begging to be unleashed. Air commanders want priority targets shifted. Naval commanders want ports taken fast. Everyone is tugging at the same cloth, and Eisenhower keeps it from tearing. He makes decisions that feel slow in the moment and inevitable in hindsight. He backs Montgomery's broad front concept for now because it keeps the Germans fixed. He supports Bradley's attritional push because it preserves force. He protects Patton's readiness for the breakout he knows is coming. He refuses to be seduced by a single, brilliant thrust that could overextend Allied supply lines. This is what German commanders never learned to respect in him. They wanted a battlefield magician. They got a war architect. On the German side, the professionals are now scrambling to survive the consequences of their own disbelief. Rommel pushes reinforcements toward Caen and Bayeux. He orders counterattacks that bleed German infantry white in the hedges. Panzer divisions begin to arrive in Normandy, Hitlerjugend, Panzer Lehr, 2nd Panzer. But they arrive in pieces, battered by Allied air attacks on roads and rail lines. Every day, Allied fighters patrol cab rank style over the battlefield, waiting for targets. A German column that moves in daylight becomes a funeral procession. Trucks are set ablaze on roads. Tanks are cratered before they ever fire a shot. German operational skill still exists. You see it in the way they defend a crossroads, in the speed of a local counterattack, in the discipline of their artillery. But skill cannot substitute for air control, fuel, and freedom of maneuver. The Allies are not just beating Germany on the beaches, they are suffocating Germany in the sky. By the second week after D-Day, the German command has shifted from throw them into the sea to hold the line long enough to avoid collapse. It is a psychological retreat that happens before the physical one. Eisenhower feels the pressure from Washington and London. Everyone wants Cherbourg. Everyone wants Caen. Everyone wants the breakthrough that will make headlines. But Eisenhower is staring at a different clock. He knows Normandy is not a battle to win quickly. It is a battle to win, certainly. He keeps ordering reinforcements. He keeps the ports and beaches running. He keeps the coalition aligned on the same grim, grinding cadence. This is not charismatic command. It is what victory actually looks like at scale. And quietly, as June drags forward in smoke and mud, the realization lodges deeper into German minds. They mocked Eisenhower because he didn't look like their kind of general. They mistook his lack of theatrics for lack of danger. But a general who can keep an alliance unified, a supply system fed, and multiple armies advancing in step, that is not a politician. That is the most dangerous kind of commander in modern war. Section 6. The breakout that proved who Eisenhower really was, July 1st, 25th, 1944. Normandy, from Caen to St. Lo. By July, Normandy has become a furnace. The air hangs heavy with smoke and summer heat. Flies gather on the rims of helmets and on the lips of the dead. The hedgerows that once felt like green walls are now blackened, chipped by shell fire into jagged teeth. Every road is cratered. Every village is a skeleton. The Allies have been ashore nearly a month, and the German army has not expelled them. But it has succeeded in one thing: slowing them to a crawl. Caen is still contested. St. Lo is a ruin. American infantry is exhausted by hedgerow fighting that turns every yard into a gamble. British and Canadian forces hammer at German armor near Caen, absorbing counterattack after counterattack. The fighting is so thick it feels like the earth itself is grinding. To German professionals, this is the kind of war they know. Attrition, defense in depth, localized tactical superiority. Hold long enough, and perhaps the enemy's coalition breaks apart under strain. In their old mental script, this is where the politician general starts to wobble, where patience runs out, egos flare, and the Allies sink into argument. But Eisenhower is not wobbling. He is waiting. He's been waiting for Normandy to ripen into the kind of battlefield where his real weapon can be used: air power, logistics, and momentum. In early July, he faces the hardest coalition pressure of the campaign. Montgomery's drive on Caen has stalled at a cost that alarms London. American commanders want to break free from the hedgerows and push south. The press begins to whisper about slow progress. In Washington, questions drift in like mosquitoes. Eisenhower listens, absorbs, then keeps the plan aimed at the same throat: pin the German armored force near Caen, bleed it where it's strongest, then smash the thin German line in the American sector and pour through. This is not a gamble, it's a trap. To set it, Montgomery launches a series of brutal operations east of the Orne: Epsom, Charnwood, Goodwood. Not all tactically successful, but strategically perfect. They drag German panzers toward Caen like iron filings to a magnet. The Germans cannot ignore the threat there. Their best armor piles into that sector, where Allied naval guns and aircraft chew at it daily. Rommel watches his panzer strength erode field by field. His reports grow darker. His drivers are sleeping under tanks because moving by day is suicide. Fuel runs low. Replacement crews are green. Yet he keeps feeding the Caen fight, because if Caen collapses, the road to Paris opens. The iron law of Normandy becomes this: where the Germans are strong, they are pinned. Where they are weak, they are about to be shattered. On July 18th, Rommel is badly wounded when his staff car is strafed by Allied aircraft. Command in the West passes through hands already frayed by Hitler's suspicion. Rundstedt is dismissed, replaced by Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, a man competent, yes, but trapped between battlefield reality and Berlin fantasy. The German command is now a professional body with a political head that refuses to feel pain. Eisenhower sees the moment coming. He authorizes the plan that will decide Normandy. Operation Cobra. On July 24th, the first attempt goes badly. American bombers, flying through smoke and confusion, drop some loads short. Friendly casualties bite hard, the kind of incident that can freeze a commander into caution. Eisenhower does not freeze. He adjusts. He insists the operation go forward. On the morning of July 25th, 1944, the sky over the German line west of Saint-Lô turns into a wall of engines. Thousands of Allied heavy bombers arrive in waves. The ground trembles as if a god is walking across it. Bombs churn hedgerows into craters. German trenches vanish. Whole companies are stunned into silence, half buried, their command lines snapped. When the bombing ends, there is a strange pause. Then the American infantry and armor surge forward through a line that is no longer a line. German survivors stumble out dazed, ears ringing, eyes full of dust. They fire out of reflex, not coordination. Their anti-tank guns are twisted wrecks. Their officers cannot find their men. Their map is now a lie. This is the moment the Atlantic Wall truly dies. Not on the beaches, but in the open wound behind them. American tanks break into the countryside south of Saint-Lô. The hedgerow maze gives way to more open ground. Patton's Third Army, finally unleashed on August 1st, pours through the gap like a river released from a dam. Trucks and Shermans roll past burnt German positions in endless columns, not stopping to celebrate, barely stopping to breathe. German commanders had mocked Eisenhower as a man of committees. Now they are watching him do what committees cannot do, turn a stalemate into collapse on a timetable. Cobra is not a lucky strike. It is the finishing blow of a system Eisenhower built months earlier. Because air supremacy makes the bombardment possible. Because logistics makes the breakout sustainable. Because coalition unity makes the timing perfect. The Germans try to patch the breach. Panzer Lehr is shattered. Infantry divisions are scooped aside. Kluge orders counterattacks that arrive too late and too small. Hitler, still convinced some grand reversal is possible, demands a counterstroke toward Avranches. Operation Lüttich, a desperate thrust ordered from a map table hundreds of miles away. It fails under Allied air and artillery like a spear thrown into a storm. As Patton races west into Brittany and east toward the Loire, German forces begin to fold back on themselves. Roads clog with retreating columns. Allied fighter-bombers hunt them all day. The retreat becomes a slaughter, then a rout, then the looming nightmare that German professionals dread more than death. Encirclement. Somewhere in the German command that July, the perspective flips completely. They had feared Patton. They had respected Montgomery. They had underestimated Eisenhower. Now they understand the hierarchy of danger. A brilliant tactician can win a battle. A hard defender can delay an invasion. But a commander who can coordinate air, sea, land, and alliance, and then time the hammer blow to break an army's spine. The commander wins wars. And Eisenhower, the politician general, has just shown he is exactly that. Section 7. The Falaise Trap and the End of German Illusions, August 7th, 21st, 1944. Normandy to the Falaise Pocket. The breakout doesn't end the battle. It changes its shape. By early August, the war in Normandy is no longer a hedgerow grind. It is motion. Columns of armor, dust trails on country roads, villages flashing by like half-remembered dreams. The Allied front stretches and curves. like a net being cast wider every day. To many of the American and British soldiers driving through the heat, it feels like the war has finally cracked open. They see German prisoners by the roadside, hollow-eyed, limping, carrying helmets like buckets. And they begin to believe the enemy is finished. But the Germans are not finished yet. They are wounded and dangerous. Hitler orders his counterattack toward Avranches on August 7th, Operation Lüttich, a desperate attempt to sever Patton's spearhead and cut the Americans off from their supply lines. German tanks push forward near Mortain, grinding through the morning mist. There is grim professionalism in the maneuver, a last twitch of the Wehrmacht's old nerve. But professionalism can't outrun geography anymore. Allied codebreakers have read parts of the plan. American infantry digs in on high ground. And overhead, the sky belongs to the Allies so completely that German armor might as well be marching under a spotlight. As the German panzers advance, fighter bombers roll in like hawks. Rockets slash down into columns. Tanks erupt into black smoke. Tracks snap. Roads become iron graveyards. The counterattack stalls. Then it breaks. If the Germans had any remaining illusion of initiative in the West, Lüttich kills it. Now the Allies take the initiative in a way that is more terrifying than any single breakthrough. They begin to encircle. Patton's Third Army swings east from Avranches, racing toward Argentan. British and Canadian forces push south from Caen toward Falaise. Between them lies the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army. Tens of thousands of men and a dwindling number of tanks trying to retreat out of Normandy as the jaws close. It is here that Eisenhower's command becomes a test of nerve. The field moves too fast for tidy plans. Units are out on the edge of supply. Maps are redrawn every few hours. Commanders on the ground are making life and death decisions without waiting for permission. The kind of scenario where a politician general might lose control. Eisenhower doesn't lose control because he doesn't try to micromanage it. He delivers intent. He keeps the pace unified. He lets his best leaders work. Bradley manages the American side of the tightening net. Montgomery coordinates the British-Canadian drive. Patton pushes like a spear that knows where the heart is. Eisenhower's role is to keep them aimed at the same throat. Inside German units, the reality is turning radioactive. A lieutenant in the 7th Army marches his surviving platoon along a road clogged with refugees, horse carts, shattered trucks, wounded men on foot. He hears Allied artillery behind them like a giant closing a door. Overhead, aircraft circle. Every time a German vehicle tries to move in daylight, it becomes a smoking husk within minutes. The retreat is no longer a retreat. It's a collapse with direction. At night, German convoys surge west and east through narrow lanes, engines off, men pushing vehicles by hand in the dark when fuel runs out. They sleep in ditches. They drink from puddles. Officers who once quoted operational doctrine now spend their days trying to keep men from throwing away rifles and scattering into fields. Klug reports the worsening crisis to Hitler. He pleads for a withdrawal beyond the Seine. Hitler refuses, barking orders to hold, counterattack, stabilize. Words from a man who thinks maps are reality. The professionals are now trapped inside a fantasy with guns. As the pocket tightens around Falaise, the killing becomes industrial. Allied artillery hammers every road. Fighter bombers hunt anything that moves. German columns bunch up, then are shredded, then bunch again. Horses scream. Gasoline burns in bright sheets. The air smells like dust and charred metal. Medics can't reach the wounded. The wounded can't crawl away. And still, thousands of Germans fight their way out in small groups, because even in collapse, the Wehrmacht is resilient. They abandon tanks to save men, throw away guns to carry wounded, crawl through forests that are turning into fire lines. The pocket doesn't close as cleanly as some Allied planners want. There are debates about whether to seal it sooner, whether to push harder, whether British-Canadian forces should drive faster south or if Americans should thrust deeper north. Those debates happen under Eisenhower's umbrella, and that umbrella holds. He refuses to let coalition rivalry derail the operational truth. The Germans are being crushed, and the crushing must continue. By August 21, the Falaise pocket is effectively closed. The ground inside is a graveyard of smashed armor and abandoned vehicles. Allied soldiers walk through it, stunned by the scale. Hundreds of blown-out panzers, trucks, artillery pieces, carts, dead horses, scattered personal items, letters, shaving kits, field Bibles soaked in oil. It looks less like a battlefield and more like a civilization that has been fed into gears. When German survivors stumble out of the pocket eastward, many are no longer thinking about victory or even about holding France. They are thinking about getting home alive. For the German command, Falaise is the strategic death of Normandy. The army that was supposed to throw the Allies back into the sea has been gutted instead. Not annihilated, but shattered beyond recovery. And it is impossible now to deny what caused it. Not a single genius maneuver, not one heroic gamble, but a coalition war machine moving in synchronized violence, air, land, sea, logistics, deception, command unity, all governed by Eisenhower's calm, relentless direction. The politician general they mocked has not only broken their wall, he has broken their army in France. Section 8. The dangerous kind of general. August 22nd or September 1944. From the Seine to Paris, and the final German reckoning. The day after Falaise, the German front in France is less a line than a hemorrhage. Columns that escape the pocket limp eastward toward the Seine, leaving a trail of wreckage that can be traced from the air like a scar. The Wehrmacht still has disciplined units, still has officers who can improvise, still has the reflex to fight. But the massed power that once made Germany terrifying has been hollowed out in Normandy. On August 23rd, Allied reconnaissance planes spot the Seine crossings clogged with German traffic. Bridges are bombed, repair crews work under fire. Pontoon sites appear and vanish overnight. The retreat becomes a race with death as the river widens behind them, and Allied armor closes in front. American soldiers driving the dusty roads of northern France now feel the war changing again. Villages erupt in cheers. French civilians run into the road, waving tricolor flags that had been hidden for 4 years. Wine appears out of nowhere, pressed into hands that still smell of cordite. Some GIs laugh, some cry, some stare in disbelief at a country waking from occupation while they're still half inside battle. Yet the retreating Germans do not simply dissolve. They fight at river lines, at crossroads, in towns that become last-stand strongpoints. A rear guard here, a bridge demolition there. Every delay buys time for another battered division to escape. This is the professionalism Eisenhower respects. He doesn't despise it. He plans around it. At Schaff headquarters, the Supreme Commander's map is now a sweep of arrows moving east, far faster than even optimists expected in June. But with speed comes danger. Supply lines stretch. Fuel dumps lag behind the armored spearheads. Roads are clogged with everything moving at once. Trucks, tanks, ambulances, engineers, refugees. The kind of moment when an overconfident commander might chase glory and lose an army in the chase. Eisenhower does not chase glory. He insists the advance stay tethered to reality. He orders priorities: secure ports, repair rail lines, keep the front fed before it outruns its own stomach. He absorbs complaints from generals who want to race faster. He keeps a steady hand on a runaway tempo. Again, his strength is not flash. It is control of scale, and it is here, in the speed after victory, that German commanders finally understand what they misread. They had trained themselves to recognize threats by familiar shapes. A cavalry genius, an armored visionary, a battlefield gambler. Eisenhower does not match these shapes. He does not arrive at the front with a crop, a pistol, or a personal myth. He arrives with schedules, coalitions, and a sure sense of what matters next. To German eyes early in 1944, that looked like weakness. Now it looks like inevitability. On August 25th, Paris rises. The city has been boiling for days. Strikes, barricades, firefights in the streets between French resistance and German units. Eisenhower had not planned to take Paris immediately. The city is a logistical sinkhole, a political bonfire, a place where a wrong move could tangle the Allied advance. But a different kind of necessity emerges. The French want their capital liberated by French troops. The resistance is bleeding. The political future of post-war Europe is crystallizing in real time on those streets. Eisenhower sees it clearly. He authorizes General Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division to enter the city with U.S. support. It is not a decision driven by romance. It is a decision driven by strategic truth. Wars don't end only when armies collapse. They end when legitimacy shifts. The liberation of Paris becomes an explosion of human sound. French civilians swarm tanks, crying, laughing, slapping steel hulls as if touching the Allies makes them real. Church bells that have been silent for years ring until ropes burn hands. Women in torn dresses kiss strangers. Men emerge from basements carrying rifles that had been buried since 1940. German soldiers inside the city, some determined, some simply tired, surrender in groups. Their officers sign capitulation papers in rooms that smell of smoke and old stone. The tricolor rises over the Eiffel Tower like a flag pulled from the lungs of the city. On the German side, there is no more illusion left to protect. Klug is gone. Rommel is recovering from his wounds and will soon be forced into an abyss of Germany's internal politics. Rundstedt watches from the sidelines, brought back to command only because no one else can pretend to hold the West together. The German professional class, the ones who once sneered at Eisenhower's staff career, now have to study his results like a postmortem. They see the invasion weather gamble that succeeded because it was supported by 20 other gambles made safe through preparation. They see Fortitude's deception that froze panzer reserves at the critical hour. They see air supremacy won methodically, then used surgically. They see a coalition kept moving in one direction despite personality wars that would have split lesser men. They see logistics treated not as a background chore, but as a weapon. In the end, they see that Eisenhower's war was never about beating them in a duel of operatic tactics. It was about strangling their ability to duel at all. There is a line some German officers will repeat later in captivity, half in admiration, half in bitterness, that the Allies did not fight with one army, but with a system. Eisenhower built and drove that system, and that is why the Atlantic Wall, so terrifying on paper, so certain in German minds, died the way it did, not in a single moment of collapse, but under the relentless pressure of a machine too large, too coordinated, and too well led to be stopped once ashore. In September, as Allied forces sweep toward the German border, Eisenhower stands again before maps that have moved from Normandy to the Rhine. He looks older than he did in June. His eyes carry the fatigue of a man who has watched decisions become graves. But his posture is the same. Steady, undramatic, dangerous. German commanders had mocked him as a politician general because they did not recognize a new kind of war leader. They believed the greatest general was the one who could win a battle. Eisenhower has proven something else. In modern war, the greatest general is the one who can make nations fight as one and make the enemy's professionalism irrelevant. And by the time Germany understands that, the Atlantic Wall is behind them, Paris is lost, and the road east is filling with Allied steel. And that's the legacy of Dwight D. Eisenhower. the calm architect of D-Day, the master of deception who outplayed Hitler, and the wartime commander who later steered America through a new era as president. His story proves that leadership isn't only about brute force. It's about strategy, timing, and the courage to carry impossible responsibility. If you enjoyed this journey from Normandy to the White House, don't stop here. In the next video, we're heading to the Eastern Front to meet the man who broke the Nazi war machine face to face. Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov. How did he turn chaos into victory at Moscow, Stalingrad, and Berlin? Click the next video to find out.